Hey guys, Dallas from SFR here. Today we're going to be talking about shocks and specifically getting into the differences between kind of your more off-the-shelf type shocks that may come with a lift kit or that you would get at a parts store and more performance-oriented rebuildable shocks. So we're going to start off today by talking about really what shocks do. And a lot of people don't understand it. It's kind of a little bit of a mystery, but really it just comes down to controlling the motion of the vehicle. Keeping it from bouncing, keeping it from rocking back and forth. And the way it's done, it's pretty simple. You got a tube with a piston in it, or in this case, piston in a larger tube, and it moves back and forth in an oil. There are holes in the piston that allow the oil to flow through, and by controlling the oil flowing through those holes with valving, you can control how quickly the piston can move back and forth and how much control it has over the body of the vehicle. So talking about size of shocks, you'll hear guys talk about, I've got 2-inch coilovers, 2.5-inch shocks, 3-inch, whatever. They're talking about the overall size of the piston. And the reason it's important is the bigger the piston is, the more leverage and the more power you have to control that motion of the vehicle. You really can't have too big of a shock. You can definitely have too small of a shock. I took a couple of just generic white body shocks. They're pretty much the same as anything that comes in a lift kit. I took one, I cut it open. Now, normally this whole section here would be filled with oil, and usually an oil and gas mix. This outside chamber here, it's just full of oil. It doesn't do anything. Your actual shock is this little small tube down through the center, and this is your piston. The oil is flowing back and forth through the piston. On compression, it'll flow downwards through here as the shock moves up. On rebound, it'll come back up through as it extends. You notice the real shock in here, it's not very big. It's probably not even 1.5 inches in diameter, even though the body's quite fat. And that's why a lot of times these things can be deceiving, because a shock company can decide, we're just going to make the body of the shock really fat, and it makes it look like a bigger shock, even though it's really not. Now, the weight of your vehicle has a huge effect on your shock's performance. And that's one of the big reasons why just buying an off-the-shelf shock or asking on forums what shock is going to work for me doesn't really work. Because this shock here, the valving is what it is. In this case, it's controlled by a coil spring. And you don't know what the company built that to. It could have been a really lightweight stock vehicle. It could have been a Jeep that's already been lifted and has winches and a whole bunch of stuff on it. You just don't know. And the problem is, if it was built for a really lightweight vehicle and yours is really heavy, well, you're not going to have a whole lot of shock valving in there, and it's not going to control the motion of your vehicle. Now, the reason we go to one of these more performance shocks is all in this piston head here. And you can see in this piston that I've taken off, there are all these ports that run through. And that's where your oil goes through, whether on the compression side or the rebound side. And the way they tune it is with these shims here. Now, these act really similar to a leaf spring. They cover up the ports, and when the oil tries to go through, it pushes against the shims and they flex away, allowing the oil to pass through. And you can vary the thickness of these shims, the diameters, and that's what controls how tight or how soft your valving is. And it's infinitely adjustable for any vehicle.
Alright, so now we're going to talk about a gas charged shock. Now, almost all shocks you buy nowadays are gas charged. They're under pressure. And you'll notice that if you ever buy one off the shelf, you try to compress it and it extends back out again. And that's because of the pressurization. The reason for that gas charge is to prevent cavitation of the oil at the piston. What will happen when it's moving really fast is the oil actually boils and you'll get bubbles in the oil. And what happens there is those bubbles, they'll pass right through the piston they don't slow it down any like the oil. So you lose all your valving, you lose your performance. So that's the reason for having the gas charge. Now in a regular shock that doesn't have a reservoir on it, the gas and the oil are mixed together. And this works, it does an okay job, but in a really good shock, you'll have this remote reservoir. And what they do there is they put a floating piston, a divider, in the middle of the reservoir so that your shock is all in oil. There's no gas in there. And the gas is just on the other side of the piston, and it's pushing against it, keeping everything pressurized to prevent that cavitation. As an extra benefit, you also get a lot more oil, which provides extra cooling to the shock. So one of the biggest questions everybody always asks when we're talking about performance shocks is, they're so much more expensive. What makes them worth it? Well, aside from all the performance benefits that we've already discussed with the valving, another big one is these shocks are completely rebuildable and serviceable, giving them more or less an infinite lifespan. Now this one's all taken apart. I've got all the seals laid out here, shims, piston, shaft. All these are replaceable parts that you can buy individually. So if you wear out a seal and your shock starts to leak, you can order a seal kit, you rebuild it for about 20 bucks, you're back in business. Whereas with one of those other shocks, you just throw it away and you gotta buy a whole new shock. In addition, when you buy a good quality shock, the companies stand behind it. You can call them up for assistance, they'll help you out. I've worked with all the major shock companies, and all of them have entire departments that are there to help you. Whether it's King, Fox, Swayaway, Bilstein, they all make great quality products, they all stand behind the products, and you can rebuild them and keep them going forever, and change the valving and tune them for your vehicle as you change the vehicle and add to it.